We must draw lessons from not only our ideological pillars on the need to be deliberate in our planning, but also we must be deliberate in the political education and development of the soldiers of our movement, because it is these soldiers who will carry the baton of governance. We must draw lesson from the unpreparedness of those who came before us, from the poverty of development from within the former liberation movement of Africa, and it is this lesson that will make us a viable post-colonial alternative. It is this unpreparedness that has made Africa a perpetual victim of the West and has allowed imperialism to render us as a conquered people upon whose backs the world stands. It is the unpreparedness by the post-liberation movement of Africa to preside over the means of production and to chart a sustainable political and social and economic way forward that has led our nation to degenerate to war, poverty, corruption, and starvation. The unpreparedness of those who led the battle for political freedom in Africa has led to a self-compromise and dependency on those who conquered us. And as a result, we have never escaped the hands of colonialism and imperialism. The unpreparedness is what Frantz Fanon refers to in the pitfalls of national consciousness. It is an unpreparedness that leads those who have liberated us to play a role of reminding us of the victories of the past as a way to blackmail us into submission because they never had a plan for the future. It is the lack of the planning for the day after victory that leads to an infertile and underdevelopment class of politicians assuming political power but not knowing what to do with that power after day of victory. It is Frantz Fanon who makes a prophecy that we can see with our so-called liberators today. It is Fanon who tells us that, open quote, the party which during the battle had thrown itself the whole nation is now falling apart. The party is becoming a means of private advancement, close quote. The Party of Liberation in South Africa is falling apart. And as it falls apart, we are able to see that it was never prepared for the day after victory. The so-called liberators of South Africa continue to prove their unpreparedness in all spheres of society, a society which is today in a state of collapse. The so-called liberators of South Africa appoint people to preside over state-owned enterprises such as in Eskom, and then when these people fail as we predicted they would, they conveniently say that they are apartheid spies and right-wingers, yet they are the ones who appointed them. They have no right to call Ramaphosa an apartheid spy or an agent of imperialist forces because they are the ones who deployed him in a position he is. They deploy people. When those people fail them, they think they've got a right to label them. They have no right to label those who have failed us as a result of the Al-Qaeda deployment. The so-called liberators prove their unpreparedness when a building burns in the city of Johannesburg, a building that they have allowed to collapse, degenerate, and succumb to hijack, and they turn around and blame apartheid and foreign nationals. The so-called liberators of our country were not prepared for the day after victory because they had no political will or intention to reverse the cardinal sin of land theft and the monopolization of our minerals by a white minority. The EFF, whose moment is 2024, cannot afford to make this mistake. We must never make the mistake of winning the battle, and then because we never prepared for victory, our role becomes to constantly remind our people of the battles we have won in the past. Lindiwe Sisulu is the most uneducated and foolish minister you can think of. Every time she opens her mouth Instead of telling people about what she's doing, she's consistently reminding them of how she fought in the bush and how they liberated us, creating an impression that we owe her and her colleagues something. We owe them nothing. No one sent them to the bush. They went because they wanted to go to challenge the material condition at the time. And therefore, they must never behave like we owe them anything. We don't owe them anything. We have actually honored them by electing them in 1994. For 30 years, we have been thanking them, and 30 years is enough to thank those who have liberated us. Comrades, preparedness for victory begins with education, so that you don't, out of lack of superior logic, you always say to the people, but we are the ones who removed Zuma. We are the ones who challenged the ANC. Do not remind them of history, for because if your history is genuine and legit, that history will speak for you. Let your work speak for you and not what you did in the past. We need leaders who will be guided by superior logic and always answer questions with decisiveness and educated answers. We need leaders of the EFF to be educated, because it is you who must occupy the highest level of legislative, judicial, and executive power. It is leaders of the EFF, its grassroots constituents, its scholars, its youth, who must flood the civil service, the political and economic administration, and all spheres of South Africa.